He had waited decades for this moment. Every year, every sacrifice, every worn-out night of work had led to her. From childhood, life had forced him into survival. He had grown up poor, learning to earn his own way before the world could even consider letting him love freely. By the time he had finally built stability, finally felt he could offer her the life she deserved, she was standing there, radiant in white, smiling at him as if nothing had ever separated them. For a lifetime, he had carried her in his heart. Every job he took, every hardship he endured, every lonely night had been worth it if it meant that one day he could hold her hand and call her his. And now he could. The ceremony was small, intimate, just enough witnesses to see their union, but not enough to shield him from the vulnerability of seeing her fully up close. She looked beautiful. The years had been kind to her, softening her features and giving her a quiet confidence he remembered from youth. But beneath the elegance, he sensed the distance he hadn't known was there. They shared their first dance under the warm glow of chandeliers, music wrapping them in its gentle hum. For a moment, he allowed himself to forget the years, the struggles, the waiting. For a moment, he thought the past didn't matter, that they had been given a second chance at the love they once dreamed of. Later that night, in the quiet of their honeymoon suite, he felt it, the subtle shift in her expression when he spoke of their shared dreams. She hesitated, a shadow crossing her eyes he had never seen before. "I need to tell you something," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the hum of the city outside. He smiled, thinking it might be a confession of affection, a long-hidden sentiment of her own. But what came next shattered him in ways words could not describe. She had been married before. She had 3 children, twins, girls, and a boy. Her life had unfolded without him, and he had never known. She had kept it hidden, not out of malice, but because she wanted him to see her as the woman he had loved for decades, the one whose heart had always belonged to him in his imagination. He tried to steady his breathing, tried to reconcile the decades of waiting with the reality in front of him. She spoke quietly of the years she had lived fully, the joys and the responsibilities of motherhood, the quiet triumphs and the sorrowful lessons, none of which he had shared. He had been absent from every milestone, every challenge, every tiny victory in her life. The shock was not scandalous. There had been no betrayal, no cheating. Yet the pain cut deeper than any infidelity could. For 61 years, he had imagined a life together that now, in this instant, seemed impossibly different from the one that had actually existed. He thought of the boy she had raised, the twins she had nurtured, the small victories he had missed. The life she had lived without him was beautiful and demanding, and it was hers. And yet, he had spent decades waiting, dreaming, hoping, believing that time would eventually bring her to him untouched by the world's trials. He remembered every lonely night, every shift worked just to survive, every sacrifice made in anticipation of this moment. And he realized, painfully, that he had loved her all these years without truly knowing the full measure of who she had become. She reached for his hand, warmth and apology in her gesture. He held it briefly, letting the weight of the touch remind him of what he had waited for and of what had been lost to time. "You waited so long," she whispered. "I wanted you to know me fully, to see all of me, even the parts you weren't part of." He nodded, but no words could come. The truth was unbearable. His heart was full of love, yet it ached with the quiet realization that love alone could not undo the life that had unfolded without him. She had built a world he had never entered, a life rich with memory and responsibility that he had no claim to, no shared history with. All the years he had endured hardship now seemed both poignant and cruel. He had done everything to prepare for this life, yet the life he had imagined was irretrievably gone. The woman he had waited for had existed in another reality, one he had missed. He stayed for the night, silent, observing her with a quiet reverence. He saw the love she had given to others, the depth of her heart, the sacrifices she had made, and he loved her still. But he loved a version of her that no longer existed. By morning, he had made his decision. He dressed quietly, leaving the note on the bedside table. He did not accuse, did not judge. There was no bitterness, only the slow, aching sorrow of a man who had waited long enough to know that some things, no matter how desperately desired, could not be reclaimed. She awoke to the quiet of the room, the empty space beside her, the soft rustle of sheets where he had slept. She read the note, and in it the simple truth. He had loved her with all he had, but he could not live in a life that had already been lived without him. He walked away without a word, stepping into the crisp morning air. Each step was heavy, yet resolute. The world was waking around him, but he carried a quiet grief, a heart full of love and loss. He had waited 61 years for this moment, and in doing so had proven the endurance of his devotion. But timing, he realized, was a force as powerful as love itself. He had loved faithfully, patiently, and entirely, and sometimes that was not enough. As the city awoke, he paused beneath the pale light of dawn, looking toward the horizon. He thought of her, of the life she had built, of the love that had endured decades, and with a sigh that held both release and sorrow, he continued walking, letting the quiet knowledge of a lifetime of love guide him forward. He had given everything he could, and now he would let life continue without him. The love had been real, the waiting had been true. But some truths, he understood at last, were meant to break the heart, even as they honored it. He disappeared into the morning mist, carrying the memory of a love that had waited decades, and leaving behind a life he could never fully claim.